Peru is one of those locations where many people are only ever able to explore via books, movies, TV shows, or photos. However, if you have the opportunity to plan a trip to Peru, this is the video for you. From train rides to hiking to food, accommodations, and many forms of transportation, I have a bunch of tips on my solo trip to Peru that can help you plan that dream adventure to make them a reality.
Hello, it's Sojourner. Let's get into logistics in Peru that of course are on my iPad. So if you see me looking down, I'm just looking at my notes. All right, so as far as logistics for Peru, you want to fly into Lima. I feel like this is the easier of the cities to fly into because it is at sea level. So Cusco is about 11,000 feet above sea level, which means you will be hit with some altitude sickness, possibly. Depends on who you are. It doesn't really hit everybody, but it hits a lot of people. So most folks generally fly into Lima first. Also, I found that there were way more flights that were accessible to get to Lima. I flew Delta Airlines from Milwaukee to Atlanta, then Atlanta to Lima, and that was a pretty smooth ride. I don't know about other airlines, but you can check and see who else flies to Peru. But I recommend flying into Lima because it's a lot easier to kind of get adjusted to being in Peru when you also don't have to worry about the altitude sickness that you could possibly get if you fly directly into Cusco. However, if you get a nice flight deal into Cusco, I mean, by all means, fly into Cusco first. As far as traveling within Peru, I was really short on time. I only had like 8 days in Peru, so I opted to fly. I flew Delta's affiliate because I do have the Delta Sky Miles Reserve Purple card, so obviously I book a lot with Delta, but I flew their affiliate called LATAM. I think it's LATAM. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, but it's Latin American airline. And so you can fly that, and it was relatively easy. I flew them a lot as well when I was in Colombia. But yes, I highly recommend them. They're really smooth. They are a little bit more expensive than like Avianca and some of the other ones you may see. So obviously pick whichever one is within your budget. As far as the best time to visit Peru, they essentially have their dry season and their wet season, but they also have a little bit of a shoulder season in there, which means you get the allure of high season without everything being closed or super rainy and not able to do during their wet season. So I'm gonna look at my notes. Their high/dry season is May to October. However, July to August is their busiest of all their seasons. So if you want the super sunny skies, perfect weather, you might want to go into July and August, perhaps maybe even in September if you want slightly less hot weather. So a lot of the websites said that their shoulder season was September to October. I would argue it could possibly be in November as well. That's when I went, and it did feel like it was a bit more of shoulder season. But you can also experience their shoulder season from March to April. So it's nice, but there aren't like as many crowds. And also you have to plan a lot of months ahead of time in order to go to Machu Picchu. So you really want to make sure that you're going in the time of year where you're going to see it the way you want to see it. So if you want the super sunny vibes, obviously you will go in their high season. And if you really don't mind, or you're kind of open to a little bit of rain, maybe consider going in their shoulder season or maybe even in their wet season, but not too much, because my tour guide did say that it's relatively difficult to do Machu Picchu if you want to hike it in February because it rains so much. So maybe just avoid February. And all this weather talk reminds me of packing. So packing in Peru was not what I expected, but also kind of what I expected after going to Colombia. They have a variety of microclimates. So Lima is a bit more warmer, not as warm as like Cartagena was, but it was a bit warmer compared to Cusco, Puno, and Lake Titicaca. So if you're going to Lima, that's where you'll get the warmest weather. However, if you want to go to Lima, to Cusco, to Puno/Lake Titicaca, you will need to pack for multiple climates. So I recommend packing layers. I wore so many layers when I was in Peru. I had a green jacket on. I did buy some stuff while I was there. So if you do forget something or you don't want to bring it with you, you can just buy it. And when you are in a place like Cusco, there was tons of little shops where you can go and buy fleece. Some of them were definitely pricier than others, but the further you get away from Plaza de Armas, probably the cheaper it'll get. But I had a jacket, I had a fleece, I did buy a hat while I was there, I bought gloves while I was there. I did buy this cute little shawl thing to wear on my last day at Machu Picchu. So if you have a raincoat, I did get some hiking boots. I have the Merrell boots, so I wanted to make sure that I had the right shoes. I also recommend bringing thin workout shirts in order to layer during hiking. So you should have all of that on your list if you are doing all of the hiking things while you're in Peru. Two things that you want to pack that are not necessarily clothing related are one, an adventure camera. I have the GoPro Hero 9. I use the chest strap on this trip. I use the selfie stick, not the selfie stick. I use my tripod, and I'll put all of the information of all the technology I've used on this trip here because I use so much of it because it was a very much an adventure trip. So if you are an adventure traveler, Peru is a great destination for you to kind of go and learn about the outdoors because it is really tied to their indigenous history of the Incas. So it's a mix of history, culture, and adventure, and you want to capture all of that on camera. So I recommend bringing your favorite camera, and again, you don't need to get a GoPro. If you do not have a GoPro, that is fine. Your phone will do just well. I also brought my DJI Pocket 2, which I technically broke, so I'm actually filming on the Pocket 3, which is pretty cool. However, just bring whatever camera you can to capture the beauty of Peru, because I promise you aren't gonna want to forget it. And the last thing I would say is important to pack is like a backpack or a day pack, maybe even a fanny pack, just to have it with you. I found for the hiking, you wanted to pack light because you were like gonna be walking for a little bit. So for my Alpaca Expeditions hike to Machu Picchu, I brought my eBags Motherloader Junior, which is my general backpack, but I made sure that it was relatively light because I use it as my carry-on for when I'm traveling. Also brought my Bays pack, which normally goes around my waist or around my chest as like my belt bag. And those are really good to have for my trips. Also, make sure your jacket has pockets because my green jacket that I wore on most, if not all, of my hikes also had pockets on the inside, which came in handy to carry other things if I did not want to carry a bag. Now on to accommodations. So y'all know I'm a Selena girl. I love staying in Selena hostels, and I did stay in two, but I did switch it up as well when I was in Cusco. So the first one I stayed in was Selena in Miraflores, which is the really popular area in Lima. It was a really nice location. I wasn't in Lima for too long, so I do want to return one day to experience more of the city, but I thought it was a great location. And also, if you are doing a lot of the tours, like I did the tour to Huacachina, which I do have a video on that I will link somewhere in this video or in the description box below for you to watch. But it was a great location to be picked up at because there are certain areas where they say like you can get picked up for your tours without paying extra, but if you kind of live outside of that, you may have to pay a little more for your tours. So I do recommend Selena Miraflores. Again, I did not stay there super long, but it was good for the night that I was there. I also stayed in Viajero Cocopele in Cusco for a night, I think, a night or two. I wanted to stay there just to switch it up a little bit to see a different hostel, and it was really pretty, super colorful. The private room was very spacious. I loved it. Incredible lighting, incredible lighting. However, I will say the one thing that I wasn't too happy about was that I was charged extra because I used their white towels to wipe my face and I had makeup on, and they said it was dirt. And it was not dirt, and so I did have to pay a little extra because they consider that a stain, which I wish was explained to me a bit more in detail up front, because normally as someone who wears makeup, I do make sure that I use the black towel that may be in hotels or hostels, or they may have clear instructions. So I was a bit irritated with that, I'm not gonna lie, but aside from that, it was a really beautiful space to stay in. I would have liked to stay there a bit longer, and also there is breakfast included when you book a private hostel room. However, where I stayed the most for my entire trip was in Selena Plaza de Armas, which I loved. I think it's one of my favorite Selenas, just like design wise. I love the balcony. It was super open. I really enjoyed staying there. The room was also really nice. Like the bathroom was probably the best Selena bathroom I've had, and I've stayed in a lot of them, like across the US and also across Central America as well as South America. So I really love this one. It's also a great location to walk to many places. Cusco isn't really a place where you necessarily need to Uber, though I did Uber every now and again if I didn't feel like walking, or after a long day of hiking or sightseeing, I didn't feel like, you know, using my legs anymore. Okay, I hiked Machu Picchu. that was enough. But I do recommend staying in Plaza de Armas with Selena because the location was perfect. I got to everything that I needed, and they were also really nice. Even when I had to wait for my tours super early in the morning, they stood there with me, like the security guard, make sure I was getting on the right one. You know, he had me sit down. He said they'll come to the door, I'll come get you. So it felt very nice, especially as a solo traveler, to feel that in a hostel, because I was also staying in the private rooms. I didn't really meet as many people, but I really enjoyed my privacy, especially after hiking for a day and doing all the outdoorsy things. To come back to my room and have a space to myself was really nice. Also, the closet was huge, the bed was nice. It was just an all around like great hostel to be in. But obviously you could stay in hotels or Airbnb, that's more your speed. I'm a private hostel room girly, so that's where I gravitate toward. But I did stay in an Airbnb after my train ride from Cusco to Puno. I took a boat to Lake Titicaca and stayed in an Airbnb that I found. It was super nice. It was on the floating village there, and it was only like $40 a night, but it was really great. Vidal was a great host. He helped me coordinate all my transportation after my train ride, which was amazing because they don't have Uber in Puno, and so I had to figure out how I was going to get from the train station over across the river, and he was super accommodating. They made me dinner that I paid for as well, in addition to staying in the room. Breakfast was also included, and he also took me back to the mainland in order to catch my shuttle back to Juliaca in order to fly to Lima to leave the United States. So I would recommend Vidal's Airbnb, and of course I will link it down below in my solo female travel guide to Peru. Now, as far as activities, I did do a lot of vlogging, so you can see all of my Peru vlogs on my channel. Obviously, Machu Picchu is the #1 attraction in Peru, so that's what most people end up doing. But you have to decide, do you want to hike it for the 4 days or 5 days? Do you want to just take the train there and back? Or do you want to do what I did and kind of get a best of all the worlds and hike for a day, but also take the train to have the train experience? So you need to figure out what you want to do, how you want to do it on your Peruvian trip, because there is so much to do. But obviously some of the things I did were sandboarding in Huacachina. I did the hike to Machu Picchu, which included a train ride there and back through Alpaca Expedition. I did a cooking class in Cusco, which was a lot of fun. I was the only person there, you know, solo traveler life. So that was also something I wanted to do on my trip. I did the ATVs to Rainbow Mountain, and finally I ended my solo trip with a luxury train ride from Cusco to Puno. Some other general tips and advice: one, with the weather, make sure you get acclimated to the altitude. I spent about 2 days in Cusco before I did any of the hiking. That's why I did the cooking class and just kind of walked around for 2 days, but they recommend that you need at least 48 hours to acclimate to the altitude in Cusco because it really can get you. I did not get altitude sickness. I did buy some pills while I was there, so if you don't have any before you go, you can buy them on your trip to Peru. However, I also drank the cocoa tea that they recommended at Viajero Cocopele. They did have a lot of the tea for free, so I just kept drinking it and drinking it and drinking it the whole first day. And by getting acclimated, you also need to drink a lot of water. Make sure you have a water bottle on hand to keep yourself hydrated. I think I did see in videos my eyes did look a little red, so I feel like I may have gotten dehydrated while I was in Peru, even though I was still drinking a lot of water. As far as for money tips, bring cash. People do accept card, even American Express in Peru, which, if you all know, it's really hard for folks to accept American Express, but a lot of places did actually accept it, as well as Visa and MasterCard. However, I do recommend you still bring cash. There are ATMs in like Plaza de Armas and some of the other plazas that you can go and walk around in order to get cash, but you can also get it from an ATM in the airport or wherever you are at where they have a currency office. With the activities, you want to make sure you get a lot of sleep. Many of them, like the Machu Picchu trip as well as the Rainbow Mountain ATV tour, I was up at like 4 o'clock, 3:30 in the morning for almost all of my tours, except for the train ride. I had to be there by like 7:45. And so if you are planning this trip, you want to build in time for rest after your tours. I did not do anything after my tours. I just went back, got some food, and went to sleep most days. My last little bit before we talk about safety is the language tip. So I am fluent in Spanish. I do speak Spanish, and I found I could use it relatively easy in Peru. And I will say, of Of all the cities, the place you probably need to know Spanish the most is Puno and Lake Titicaca. I mean, people in tourism generally speak English, but I found that even in Cusco, people really just like when you speak to them in their language. So obviously use it everywhere, but in Puno especially, I found that a lot of people didn't speak as much English. But if you don't, obviously you rely on Google Translate to help you out. And now on to solo travel safety in Peru. Overall, I was fine. I really don't have anything horrible to say about Peru. I will say I did have that one incident where they charged me for using their white towels with my makeup, but I wouldn't say it really ruined the trip for me as a Black solo female traveler. It was just another thing I have to bring with me, my own towel, I guess, when I stay in certain places, because I didn't know that my skin color could be considered a stain on towels when you all knew I was Black when I booked this trip and checked in and y'all saw what I look like. But it is what it is. Aside from that, everything was cool. I walked around relatively easily. If it was later, like if I was getting dinner late after a tour and my legs were hurting, I did take an Uber, but I always have the pin code feature on so I make sure I'm getting into the right Uber, which I also use that in Colombia as well. I also use that in the US, so it's not like unique to when I'm actually traveling outside the country. That's just something I generally do when I am using rideshare apps. So if you do use rideshare apps, though it's not really necessary in like Cusco because most things are walkable, that is something you can add as an extra layer of protection. I spent the most time in Cusco and I found that I was pretty safe. I didn't walk around with my phone out. I looked like I knew where I was going, even though I clearly set out with like blue hair at the time as a tourist. But I didn't do anything out of the ordinary that I haven't already shared, so I will link my solo travel safety video down below. I would just always say be mindful of your more expensive belongings because phones are also being snatched way more as people are traveling, as I've heard. And I did meet a woman who said she was attacked at a market for her phone. But I did enjoy my time in Peru overall, and I did feel safe as a Black solo female traveler, but of course anything can happen anywhere. And that is all I have for this guide to Peru. Thank y'all so much for watching. That was a lot. We got through a lot during this time, so I appreciate y'all sticking around. If you want my full solo female travel guide to Peru, I will link it down below in the description box, and it has the links to all of the tours I did, everything I said in this video plus a little bit more. If you want some additional packing tips and tricks, you can also go and look at that guide there. But again, thank you so much for watching. I hope you all enjoy, and I hope that when you take your trip to Peru, you have just as great of a time as I had. Thanks again, and I will see you all in my next video. Bye, y'all.